My name is Till Carlos and I spent more than $100,000 on software projects that eventually failed. Every mistake you're about to make, I made first. Someone quoted you $5,000 for an app? Well, it's gonna be $50,000. Well, here are 7 reasons why software is more expensive than you initially think. And also some tips how to slash costs by 70%. And now I know all the things that make software more costly than you initially think, and also how to mitigate them. Stick around for number 7, which is the most expensive of them all. Number 1 is the while we're at it tax. Every time someone says, wouldn't this be cool? You add 2 to 3 weeks to your timeline. My CRM project was initially planned to be 3 months, and now we are 1 year in and we are just getting done. This is just something that happens because the initial things that we thought we would need were actually vastly underestimated. We needed way more features to actually give it to the users in order for them to have benefit and to pay for it. We did this by incrementally talking to the customers, presenting them the newest stage and showing them if this is enough. And then they usually said, it's not enough, you are missing this and this and that. Through this incremental process, we also noticed that there are a couple of times where someone says, wouldn't it be cool to add this thing? And for example, we added a huge onboarding flow in order to automate how customers come to our website and purchase the software. Eventually just noticing this was not even necessary because we could just call them, get them on a call, and then we know exactly what the questions they had and exactly how to address them. This is way easier than a real automated onboarding flow, and it's also way more cheap because an automated flow costs us a month of development and now we don't use it anymore. How I mitigate this now is always to create clear versions. I would say, this is the version 1, this is the version 2, and then whatever comes later. So usually there's a proof of concept first, then there is an MVP, the minimum viable product. That's the one that we can actually sell to customers. And then there are iterative versions thereafter. And the only thing you can do is push the iterations a bit backward. You can say, this is something we need in the future. You cannot say version 3 and version 4 because you don't know what this version is going to be. So the most important thing is the version right now, version 1 that we're going to release can be a proof of concept to demonstrate it to someone. It can be an MVP. And then after it's the later version. That's the stuff that we do later because we need to get feedback first in order to decide what later actually looks like. But feature creep isn't the worst money trap. The next mistake even cost me $50,000 in rework. Point number 2, building for 1 million users when you have 12. Developers love building scalable systems, and they love to do so even if there are no users to begin with. I spent many months on a customer portal where the customer could invite their own users and have them port the data and then start working with their new portal that we created for them. Eventually, we noticed that this customer was very hesitant to even onboard them. So what we actually would have needed was just a much simpler flow where new users could sign up and then much later importing the old ones. We didn't know this because we thought we needed to have everything scalable, everything needed to be working right away, so when the customer hits the button, suddenly the floodgates open and all the users come. Usually that's never the case. The key is this, you need to build something super simple first, something even like a spreadsheet. Can this work with just a spreadsheet and a simple form you can throw up on tally.so or Typeform or something like that, and then later on you can build it when you actually know something is used. We talked about the onboarding flow. This could have just been a form. We didn't see that. We made an onboarding flow ourselves without having the users. The next time we do this, we would just use a form. Let's say we go on tally.so, it's even free. We get a new form and we send this to the people who signed up to our software, and then we call them. This would have been super simple, cost almost nothing, and also it would not add any kind of technical debt to the software. We're going to get to that later. Developers love to solve problems that don't exist yet. And some of them are really good. You want to keep those people. But what if you get the wrong people? Point 3, the wrong hire penalty. Too cheap means you need to rebuild everything, but too expensive means you maybe not have the runway to finish the project. And there are 2 different stories. One story was a developer I hired who had a good monthly rate, and I thought, okay, this is gonna work because this person had really good communication. What I then found out, what this person thought he would just work part-time. They just didn't tell us. So we thought it would give him a job for full-time, but then he said he's only have half-time time, and then of course his performance was not there. I could have seen that. I hired the wrong person. I have to admit that. It was my rookie mistake. I thought this person would communicate great, and in that case he would also deliver. Communication does not equal delivery. I should have known that. But now we had to replace him, and that cost us a lot of money and also a lot of my time, because I had to rework certain things that this person did not finish. In this case, cheap actually cost me a lot of money because I had to put in my own time, which is highly expensive. And the whole point of a software company is that you outsource things, that you don't have to do the development yourself. And in my case, I was then trapped and had to develop something I actually wanted to hand off. This was a huge mistake that cost me a lot of months of my own time. But the pendulum can also swing the other way. You can absolutely hire too expensive people, and this can have two issues. One issue is a developer who gets overpaid likely wants just to stay in their job and delay the shipping and just collect the paycheck. I've seen this happening and it's not great. Basically what happens is that developer always promises to make more features and it always looks good, and then eventually you find out that the developer cannot ship. Of course, in the end it was not in his best interest, because at one point they'd lose the job anyway, but they could maybe string along long time enough in order to collect as many pages as possible and not really focus on shipping. That's a real thing I've seen, and we had to fix that as well. It can also swing the other way. You can also hire developers who are too expensive. If that happens, the developer might only have financial incentives and doesn't really care about shipping the project. For that, you can only do good interviews before and really see what the developer cares about. If they want the high paycheck and then don't care, that's something ideally needs to get figured out in the hiring process. But it can also happen with very legitimate developers who are just having a high hourly rate. If someone costs $10,000 per month, you can only hire this one person. You cannot hire 3 people who might be even better than this one person. So if you're having someone who costs too much, you can also run out of budget and then you need to stop the project. The only thing that you can do in that case is make it very clear with the developer that this needs to get shipped, that ideally you have a certain budget constraint, and after that we need to do maintenance mode. Usually, and that's the good part of it, high paid developers are aware of that. They have a high hourly rate because they know that these projects run into problems, and they might even help you hire the next people who are maybe a bit cheaper, can then kind of load balance with someone managing a couple of cheaper developers as well. But even with the right developer, this trap can catch anyone. Point 4, edge case hell. 80% of your developer time will go into scenarios that only 20% of people will ever see. Several years ago, I built a vaccination center project, and it worked in a way that we needed a paper trail. So doctors would fill out the vaccination report, and then we would scan it in and then process the papers on our backend on the servers. We had so many of these papers being scanned that we knew we need to have a really good pipeline that works in most cases very fast. But in a few cases, we needed to find a solution for this because we didn't have so much development time to take care of all the edge cases. So what we did was, for the 20% edge cases that we knew were happening, we would just put people in place. We had actually a crew of people sitting in an office to fix the scans that were a bit wrongly aligned. And for 80% of the things, we just moved and had the pipeline take care of that. And eventually we would get better. The software would get better, the scan process would be more and more accurate, and then slowly we could take people out of that office. And eventually the software worked so well, we only had one person sometimes correcting some PDFs. The big learning here is this: document the edge cases, be aware of them, and then don't implement them. If you're very sure something's gonna happen, maybe in your first user test that you do yourself, great, implement them. But for things that you are not sure if they might even happen, document them and then put a person in place. Put some kind of fallback mechanism, maybe like a small ticket, like a ticketing desk or like a help center where you can see what failed for the users and then you fix it manually. Important is that very likely these cases will never happen. That means you don't need to implement them. And for the ones that do, you can just do it manually. The next mistake is not even technical. It is building things that are never used at all. Point 5, building features nobody uses. Complete features that 0 customers ask for is the surest way to deplete any budget. Many years ago, I created a portal for event management. And while we had a ticketing system where people could purchase tickets, that's the thing that actually worked and actually made money, we had a social media component where we wanted people to click follow or click being added to a friends group or to an event and then receiving updates from that event. Just like Facebook does it today. The problem that we had was it was too early. Back then, people were not used to Facebook. They didn't want to follow anything. They were hardly logging in once per day into their computers. And smartphones didn't exist yet. So we built a social network where nobody wanted to have a social network. That was a huge time sink, nobody used it, and eventually we had to take all the part out of the software and only run with the things that worked. The learning here is this: you only get the software to an MVP stage, and then you have some ideas that you have. You can put them there, document them, maybe brainstorm, but don't implement them. Get the MVP to the customers and ask them what they need. And then you continue to work with them. This is exactly how we built our current software as a service. And this is exactly how we made money. We just create the MVP, we notice what works for people, and then we talk to them. And now we have a feature set of things that are actually used. This is the surest way. If people don't demand a feature, you don't need to build it. But even if you build the right features, communication can also cost you a lot of money. Point 6, the communication tax. One of our last client projects of my agency, right now we run a software company, but before we had an agency. There was a situation where the client wanted to have a certain graph to show the performance of their products. We coded so long on this darn graph. It took us months to get it done, including calculations in Excel, including to make it nice and responsive. You could change numbers and it would change in real time. And we thought this would be great for the sales process. And once we showed this to the customer, he told us, no, that's not what he wanted. So we just coded for 2 months on something that we thought would be the thing they wanted, but they had something totally different in mind. We could have just called them and asked them, what do you want to have implemented? How should it look like? Give us some specifications. But we didn't do that because we thought this is the way. We saw it in an old feature of an old product and we just copied it and made it really nice. And the client says this is even bad for them. They cannot use this because it shows too much data. So we had to scrap that feature and just take the 2 months of development. And we couldn't even invoice for that. That was a huge loss for my company. This is also one of the reasons why we switched from our agency model to a software as a service. Because now we have real stakes. Our own money is at stake. And if we want to build a feature, we need to make sure it is actually needed. What is the learning here? Well, sometimes you should communicate more, of course, but many times customers don't even know what they want, or you don't know what you want. So that's why right now vibe coding is all the rage, because you can make prototyping so fast. Initially, like a year ago, 2 years ago, we would say you would code something or you make a mock-up with Google presentation or Figma or something like that. But nowadays you can just code the prototype in just the visuals and show it to the customer. Then you can make sure that this is actually something that they want to pay for. The prototyping needs to be cheap. Cannot put in real backend, real data, real coding of a developer. But this is a real good use case for vibe coding, because then you can communicate better, and with that better communication, you can actually bake the features people want to use. But the sneakiest mistake, the one that got me worst, is this one. Point number 7, the perfection premium. That was a mistake that cost me a lot of time and developer effort myself, because we wanted to make something really good. The problem was it was not even needed that much. Yes, the customers were using it, but not in the extent I thought. So we put so much effort into this one feature that was nice, but it was too perfect. We did too much. And this can happen. I've seen it over and over again, especially with developers, because sometimes this fear comes in place, this fear of showing it to users. So what the developer would usually do is hold it back and make it nicer and then release it later because they think it's not good enough. It's the developer's imposter. Now, for someone building the software as a product owner, as an entrepreneur, this is very important, because developers can have that even if they work for you. They would polish on something because they are afraid that you might reject it. So you need to be very clear with the specification, and even more important, check in regularly and tell them we need this week. Cutting features shorter and aligning deadlines closer to today is a sure way of getting things done that actually are important and then are not over-engineered. When the developer has less time at their hands, they usually figure out a way to make it work. It's called the Parkinson's law. A task will always expand to the time that you give it. And this is very true, especially for developers and also for developers that work for us. So now I make sure that I check in with developers every day. I get the report of what they did in the end of the day, and I see how much time they spent on each feature. Of course, I'm a developer myself. I know how long something should take, but you can get a feeling with this by yourself by just a couple of iterations. You see if something gets over-engineered. And by stopping that over-engineering process early is the best way to cut cost in a software development project. Reality check. All of these mistakes might just be small ones, but they will add up and they can also compound. So it's very easy that you go from a $5,000 prototype to a $50,000 software that doesn't exactly do what you want and is not even live yet. That's something I've seen, and I've seen projects getting reworked over and over again up to 3 times without actually proving business results. But with those strategies I just showed you, you can cut those problems down. You can make sure that every small feature does exactly what it should and has value for the customer.